Hello, anatomy physiology students. My name is Julian De La Rosa. I will be UTA for the fall semester 2020. It's very nice to meet you if we have not met already. Today, I thought we'd talk about the girdles, specifically the shoulder girdle. If we have time, we'll go to the pelvic girdles, and we're going to be looking at their ligaments in these joints specifically. Now, these synovial joints, very high range of motions. However, they are very unstable because there are cavities, and there's actually a space in between some of these bones, like you'll see in the shoulder joint right here. So you do need forms of support like ligaments and then muscle tendons, but we'll get to muscle tendons and muscle attachments later on. There are a lot of names and a lot of fancy names. What's really important to look at, especially in the shoulder girdle, is that you want to look at the main bone features that are in play in that shoulder joint. So you have like the acromion process, the coracoid process, the clavicle, the humerus, and the glenoid cavity. So there's 5 things you really want to look at, and all these are going to come in contact with each other in one way, shape, or form. So let's get started and take a look at one of them one at a time. First 2 ligaments I want to start with are the coracohumeral ligament and the glenohumeral ligament. So in general, because the humerus is what is going to be moving, everything attaches technically to the humerus. So we don't say humerus to girdle, we say ligaments that go from girdle to humerus. So coracohumeral obviously would go from the coracoid process to the humerus. Looking at the glenohumeral, we do see that there are a couple right here. So we have superior, middle, and inferior going from the glenoid cavity to the humerus. And then right here we'll see the coracoid process articulating with the humerus through the coracohumeral ligament. Looking at the other 2 ligaments in the shoulder girdle that kind of can cause confusion, the coracoclavicular ligament and the acromioclavicular ligament, we do see a commonality that the clavicle goes in the end. We do see that the clavicle is not as involved in the shoulder girdle as the scapula is and the glenoid cavity is. So really, in terms of attachment, the scapula, in my opinion, proves more purpose than the clavicle. So we're going to put the clavicle last. So looking at the coracoclavicular ligament, it attaches the coracoid process of the scapula to the clavicle. Looking at the acromioclavicular, it attaches the acromion to the scapula. Right there. Oh, I probably should. And you can see that there's 2 coracoclavicular ligaments here. There's actually one more I want to talk about, and that's the coracoacromial ligament. So both of these, we've seen the coracoid and the acromial being placed first in a word. So how can you tell which one will go first in this specific ligament without it being incorrect? So when you're looking at some of these ligaments, again, the coracoclavicular, the acromioclavicular, and now the coracoacromial ligament, how can you tell? Is there an easy way to look at these? Well, there actually is. If you're looking at the visible body or something, if you're looking at the actual bones, we have, again, a coracoid process, acromion, and then the clavicle. We do see that the clavicle is the highest, we see the acromion second highest, and we see the coracoid process is the lowest. So when you're looking at these ligaments, in terms of naming, we can start from going bottom up, going from a lower bone to a higher bone. So we see here, we're going from the coracoid to the clavicle. So this again is the coracoclavicular. We see the coracoid process going to the acromion. We have the coracoacromial ligament. We see the acromion going to the clavicle. We have the acromioclavicular ligament. So if you see that, generally speaking, it doesn't work all the time, but just for these 3, we see that going from one bone to a higher bone feature, that is how you can name your ligaments. So now we have the pelvic girdle. So we will have attachment between the pelvis and the femur. I think the leg is probably the most important, so you do have some pretty big ligaments, some pretty big muscle attachments here. So generally speaking, and we do know that in the pelvis there are 3 different regions. So we have the ilium, the pubis, and the ischium. I used to call it ischium. Anyways, so each one of these features is going to have to attach to the femur in some form, type, or way. So we're going to do this right now through ligaments. Really, we do know that everything is going to be attaching to the femur. So the femur is going to be the last because that's the common thing they all have. So we have something from the ilium to the femur, and we're going to add a little fancy twist to it. So we have the iliofemoral ligament. Going from the pubis to the femur, we're going to have the pubofemoral ligament. All right, we're going to break up pubis into pubo because that pubo can be like a combining form. That's like the word root that is usually used to attach everything. So pubofemoral. And then the last part we have to look at is the ischium. Ischium connecting to the femur is more posterior than any of the others, so the ligament attachment is going to be in the back. So going from ischium to femur, we have the ischiofemoral ligament. Pretty straightforward. Femur is the commonality, the common denominator for everything, so there's going to be last in all these terms. Now we do have two more in the back. We do have the sacrum here, which is part of our vertebral column. That is going to attach to our pelvis in two areas. Now, there's multiple other attachments, but we're just going to focus on two. So both of these attachments from the sacrum are going to attach to the ischium in some way, shape, or form. Two different spots. So we do have the ischium spine, and we also have the ischium tuberosity down here. So unlike the shoulder we just talked about earlier, instead of going from low to high, this is going to go from high to low. We do see the sacrum going to the spine of the ischium, so we're going to call that the sacrospinous ligament. Add a little fancy twist to it. We're going to go from the sacrum to the tuberosity. We're going to call this the sacral tuberous ligament.